Ordinals really set this Bitcoin season.
On the Fractal team side, we're also implementing like Opcat-based voting mechanisms.
Biggest challenge of building in the space is just the lack of developer tooling that we have, right?
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Fractal podcast. And today we have myself, of course, one of the core contributors of Fractal. And we have, one of our esteemed guests for today, Robert Clarke, one of the co-founders of SaaS Flow. Hey Robert, how are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, super awesome to have you on. I think we've known each other for a long time in this space. We've been building in the, crypto industry, in the Bitcoin industry for a bit. And I feel like, with the announcement of Satflow new DEX trading experience and marketplace yesterday, I really wanted to spend some time today with you to kind of go through everything, all the good stuff. And I know this episode is probably going to be released maybe a little bit later, probably next week or whatsoever. And by this time, you guys would have so much more data, so much more traction, so much more users already using it. But I felt it was a really good snapshot because, just really wanted to capture these early thoughts. But before we start, Robert, please, do a bit of intro of yourself. And maybe I would love to hear how your journey in crypto and in Bitcoin has been and what got you to here today.
Absolutely. I guess it starts around about the time that we got connected around 3 years ago. It all starts with the CryptoPunks community. I've been sort of a big collector and follower of CryptoPunks on Ethereum, which was how I entered the fray within Bitcoin with Ordinals early last year. I started mining Bitcoin over a decade ago and always had a love of the unlocks that came with cryptocurrency, the self-sovereignty, decentralization aspects. It was cool to make a few bucks on my, gaming PC back in the day. And, when I was just mining, Bitcoin on a gaming computer, essentially, right? Got sucked into the DeFi worlds on Ethereum in sort of the 2015 era. Like many of us, we saw this Ordinals.com start popping up on our timelines in February of last year. And having not been super involved or active around Bitcoin for a while, I was pleasantly surprised that people are doing all these creative, cool things like inscribing artwork as NFTs. Having just been, very active on the CryptoPunk side within Ethereum, I was super fascinated with bringing the collectibles over to Bitcoin. So we spun up an early experiment, bitcoinpunks.com, just a pure kind of hacker weekend project because we had no idea really at this stage what Ordinals really were, except that it was on Bitcoin. So we shipped this and it sort of gains traction really quickly. The full 10K minted out, nearly instantaneously. It was a couple of days. Every Bitcoin block was just filled with these Bitcoin punks, which are essentially just a one-to-one clone of CryptoPunks on Ethereum. The first full 10K PFP collection technically, even though the art itself is not original. My co-founders and I traveled through the journey of various experiments on Bitcoin. We were, minting BRC20s quite early. We shipped Ordinals.market early last year, which was one of the first marketplaces to trade these Bitcoin collectibles. It all led us towards Satflow. Late last year, we started to see the trading volumes really pick up, and the gap that we saw was around the mempool. Bitcoin's 10-minute block times present such a trading challenge, really, as there's a lot of state changes that are happening before blocks are actually confirmed. We built Satflow essentially as a mempool-first Bitcoin exchange for Bitcoin assets, Ordinals, runes, BRC20s, and such. And the whole experience is centered around this per second basis change that you're seeing for these assets. And as you noted, we just went live after building in private beta for about 10 months. So Satflow is now available to use, and you can trade your Ordinals and runes now on satflow.com.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Robert, for sharing your journey. I think I remember, when you were very deep in the overall NFT community, since we first met, you and your team are just so quick to respond to what I think new innovations are, especially in Bitcoin. Since then, you guys have done so many different interesting things, right? But I think it all kind of culminated in your Satflow product launch that happened recently. What are some of the maybe the shadows of what you have seen from the Ordinals market times to Satflow, and how is that kind of help you think about the product? How do you help you think about the sort of the user experience, all that kind of good stuff?
Ordinals really set this Bitcoin season into motion. This is kind of different to Ethereum in that we started with the collectibles aspect, and now we're seeing more popularity and attention around fungibles. BRC20 and now runes here on Bitcoin are the big standards. There are unique problems to build on Bitcoin. It really is these sort of 10-minute block times that present a very interesting trading challenge, as users can compete for transactions through MEV on Bitcoin with sniping in the mempool and so forth. Building a great DEX on Bitcoin, the thing that really sets it apart from other ecosystems is this adherence to the mempool and what's going on there. So for us, that's been a big focus.
What is maybe mempool sniping, or how does that work in simple terms? I think previously the beta product you had, I think some connotations of allowing people to trade in those kind of situations. That vision and view has also evolved now, right? I think, I saw a tweet is long live, the mempool sniping and so on. So I would love to hear kind of how you are thinking about this right now with the renew strategy.
Kind of in our early experimentation as we're building this mempool-first exchange, we were starting to see, as Ordinals and clips of BRC20 were still unsettled in the mempool, users could essentially go in and bid up the transaction, right, due to the way that the transactions are constructed. So say someone's buying a Node Monk, it's my favorite Ordinal collection, so I have to talk about it. And the price is appreciating very rapidly for Node Monks, right? Just in the mempool, there are sweeps from, 0.1 to say 0.2 Bitcoin. Right? Other folks, other market participants can bid up that opportunity, pay Bitcoin miners more in fees to win the transaction, right? So we've been seeing a lot of this activity in the last 9 months as market participants have become more mature, are starting to get better at trading. And many folks don't appreciate that on Ethereum, we've had this for a while, right? With CryptoPunks, for example, it's very programmatic in the way that MEV is done. So if there's a underpriced CryptoPunk for sale, often people will be paying high fees on a programmatic basis. So it's just sophisticated bots and other actors that are winning the trades. On Bitcoin, because everyone has 10 minutes to compete, that is a long time for either the price to rise quite a lot or fall quite a bit. So our early product was focused on letting people compete for these transactions, bid up the transactions to miners and let the miners reap the rewards of that. With Satflow today, we've introduced a kind of more sophisticated transaction design where we take joint ownership with a user for 1 block duration so that they can get the transaction and it cannot be intercepted by any other market participants. It's purely between now you as the buyer and the seller, right? So we're entering kind of a new era on Bitcoin that even though we have the slow block times and that can mean a lot of competition for miner fees paid, the mempool sniping we see is going to be going away as people use, this transaction format that means that they have to sort of monitor each transaction like a bidding war, right? It just allows for that more of a better experience for these folks, right?
I know that, earlier days, what I mean by early days is probably over the past couple of months. I'm sure a lot of your users on the beta products and so on have just done pretty well, right? Because they may have use the product, use the tools or other tools, right, to help them with their experience. It's one of those things where I believe that, as long as there's a market and opportunity, there's always going to be users who do certain things, right, in this market. So it's one of those things where I guess what are these traders or users doing now? What do you hear from them? Are they excited? Are they unhappy? Are they happy? What's going on over there?
Yeah, so all of the snipers that had access during our private beta, and even just snipers in general, I think are seeing this transition in the market. A lot of us recognize that sniping as it has existed on Bitcoin is not sustainable for new users. If a user has to go and buy the same rune 10 times before they finally get a purchase through without getting snipes, that doesn't make for a very good user experience to onboard new folks into the space. So in the early days, I think a lot of these snipers had a lot of fun with competing in the mempool. But now we want to see, I think, just some more organic trading activity where there is room for new players to actually be able to get onboarded, right? The dynamic is certainly going to shift. Previously, everyone was competing to win a few transactions, but now the underpriced trades, you're going to, I think, start to see some more competition between buyers and sellers, right? Because if the price is appreciating very rapidly, a seller is theoretically incentivized to cancel their order, and the buyer is incentivized to accelerate the transaction. So we see this shift, and I think all of the snipers are anticipating this. We're going to start to see these buyer and seller MEV wars where buyers accelerate their transactions and sellers attempt to also accelerate. So this is the inherent problem of a 10-minute block time, is that like when a rush of trading activity comes in, it brings volatility, and everyone has 10 minutes to essentially bribe miners to compete to win these transactions. So we're definitely going to see this shift, I think, in the coming weeks as, people get sophisticated to the new era of like new trading, I guess.
You guys have like essentially launched these announcements at around the same time, of course, to varying levels of your product shipping. It almost feels like it's like an overnight kind of thing, but I'm sure you guys have, been planning this and working on this for a while. So maybe take us back a little bit in time to like when you discovered that this is actually very important for your team to start working on, and what made you really decide to commit on this direction?
Like after we saw the effects of sniping really start to scale, right? As tools such as Satflow became more prevalent, we started to see that like sniping as it had existed wasn't really scalable. Again, if everyone is competing just for these transactions in the mempool, a lot of fees are being paid to miners. It really just dissuades like folks from coming in. So once we noticed that like people were still frustrated with having to bid up transactions to miners, like I think a lot of us were looking for a solution. I have to give credit to LIFO on Twitter, who initially proposed this more complex transaction design that would essentially isolate trades between just the buyer and seller. So it was, like 3-4 months ago that some early designs were starting to be seen as an alternative way to trade. And we're still seeing this playing out. Like there's still quite a bit of sniping activity today for Bitcoin native assets, but we're anticipating that the market is quickly going to shift into this secure transaction design.
I'm sure your team spent a little time since that, some early posts by LIFO. I really appreciate the shout out as well. I think it's always like sometimes understated how we should like acknowledge people who come with new ideas, but also I think give a lot of kudos to the builders who are making this happen, right? And I think your team is one of those teams that just like, took some of these ideas and they implemented this at scale, right? So like, what are some of the technical challenges? What are some of the product challenges that you guys encountered as you were implementing this particular design in the new SaaS Flow today?
The biggest one on Bitcoin is biggest like challenge of building in the space is just the lack of developer tooling that we have, right? An Ethereum builder today has a massive suite of tools. ChatGPT can write smart contracts for you. You've got API providers that can do nearly unlimited scale, right? But here on Bitcoin, we're just like more or less a year and a half into this new wave of developer and user attention. So all those API tools that help bootstrap like early projects do not exist. So we've had to build like all of the infrastructure in-house. So we're running like 30 like Bitcoin core nodes on bare metal infrastructure around the world. Like we've had to build all of the API tooling for the Bitcoin side, for the sort of Ordinal side as well. Just sort of starting from scratch definitely has meant that like we're building a little slower. But it's nice to see that there are ecosystem providers like maybe Maestro that are coming in and starting to offer more API tooling for folks to come in and just throw a project together. But, coming in at ground zero early last year and having to build, all of the API and tooling has made it like slower to get started. And also like on Bitcoin, we're still dealing with quite a primitive expressivity on the L1. We don't yet have Opcat. We don't have really any smart contract functionality. All of the trading for like Bitcoin Ordinals, runes, all of these meta protocols, it's like really you're just trading small amounts of Bitcoin with other parties like under the hood. And we're like very excited about like all of the innovation that is yet to come to unlock this sleeping giant of liquidity that is, all the Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think we are both doing some part over there, right? I think on the Fractal side, we definitely see that entire trend as well. You support Ordinals and you support runes. Maybe like, I think on behalf of the community, I suppose like, what about BRC20s? What about Fractal? What about like, Cat 20? What's your opinion on those other kind of like, standards or other kind of like opportunities for you guys?
BRC20 was the hit standard for a while, pretty much all of last year. Runes has become prevalent as, I guess, user fungible token standard of choice. at least on the meme coin side. For us, like what we really want to see is more pure DeFi experimentation going on, right? That we have not yet seen. So all of these standards are really just like, they're very primitive. It's like, you can sort of set a supply of a token, maybe some like mechanics for the supply to be minted so in a somewhat trustless way that allows miners to get some of the upside there as well. But like we don't have an Aave of Bitcoin yet. We don't have like an on-chain Uniswap of Bitcoin that's like a trustless interface to do some of this DeFi stuff. So like we're paying attention to all of the new developments, but we don't yet seem to have a clear winner for more DeFi-centric set of standards yet. That is like something to watch very closely.
And then maybe coming back to the product design, I noticed that when I was using the app, it was very smooth. It was great. It seemed like a DEX, but it also seemed like a marketplace, right? So I would love to kind of like, maybe pick behind the brain over here a little bit. Like, what was going through your mind as you design this interface with your team? What were you trying to optimize for? What are some of the gold standards you are trying to shoot towards?
It's really speed and data. When you're looking at Satflow, it has maybe some notes of mempool.space, which is the most popular explorer for Bitcoin transactions, primarily for sort of seeing in real time, like how Bitcoin is flowing, which blocks are, transactions forecasted to be included in. You're getting like that sort of WebSocket real-time experience of like how Bitcoin is flowing. Satflow is that, but for trading. So when you're looking at Satflow and you're looking at a particular rune or ordinal collection, you're seeing sub 1 second transactions coming in and how the market is moving, right? So for us, we have a very mempool-centric design that has allowed for this like data richness that I think really comes with Satflow today. And, one of my favorite things to do is just leave Satflow up on a window and just kind of watch like as ordinals come in and they're trading in the mempool, see like which runes are popular, which like collection or rune ticker has the most volume or activity at any particular time. So yeah, it's that data richness that I think really sets Satflow apart from some alternative platforms. Real-time data is the core of that experience.
It really reminds me a lot of like the Wall Street traders, right? They will always have like a Bloomberg terminal up somewhere where it's like monitoring the markets and stuff. And I think in some ways, what you're explaining with Satflow is almost trying to be that, right? In a way, right? Where traders, I'm sure like yourself, are already kind of doing that in the community and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. I think the other thing that I noticed is, like, I think very interesting design of the variables of like different things. Like, for example, like transaction, like trading fees, the sweep limits of like, 50, and also like how you're thinking about these things. So how did your team arrive at all of these variables? What gave you that insight to all of these things? And how are you thinking about, how this would, affect sustainability or revenue models or whatsoever for your team down the road?
We're currently a zero fee platform, but we're very anxious to start finding places in the experience that can generate economic activity for like potentially market makers or other such actors. In the case of Uniswap on Ethereum, for example, Uniswap had no fees for, basically nearly now the entire history of their protocol. And recently we've started to see conversations around their fee switch. There's a fee switch on the front end. There's also like a smart contract level fee switch. So these are sort of two competing ways that both the protocol and their sort of front end team can generate revenue from the business. But at its core, like most of the fees were paid out to market makers, like AMMs, right? Liquidity providers there. We're not at a place yet where LPs can generate any sort of yields or generate fees. And I think that's what we want to see next. We're really focused on just delivering a great trading experience for these assets, first and foremost. We want to like build as best we can for the community. And we think like a zero fee model makes the most sense in the near term.
The other thing I noticed is that you guys have this like Flux reward on the platform. Tell me a bit more about that. And why Flux? Like, what is the meaning behind that name? I'm dying to know more.
The term Satflow Flux, which is our reward system, was coined by our CTO. And I actually do need to press him a little bit on the origins for it. Think of it kind of as a sweetener. So we publish, kind of upfront, like what our metrics are and criteria for earning Flux on the platform. Right now, it's listing, bidding, and your loyalty to the platform. Like if your listings are unique to Satflow and you haven't listed elsewhere, whether it's Ordinal or Rune, you'll earn Flux for doing so. It's kind of the cherry on top for the platform. you'll earn Flux just by naturally using the platform. It's a sweetener for your everyday trading usage for L1 assets on Bitcoin.
Let's talk a little bit about the team. I've known you and the team are like just very, very strong executors. How did you guys first meet? How did you guys end up working together? And, any advice for builders looking to build their first team to build something meaningful in Bitcoin?
There are 6 of us right now, a very engineering focused organization at this point. Pretty much have put all our eggs in the basket of engineering and product, right? My 2 co-founders, Alex and Anatoly, we've known each other for quite a while now, 10 years actually. We've been tinkering on projects together. Back when we were essentially kids, we shipped Minecraft helper websites and, other kind of things like that when we were all playing Minecraft together. The advice I'd have for any builders is don't be intimidated at first by finding some big project. Start small, solve a problem really well for a set of users in a market that you think can grow. Really stay laser focused on solving problems for users, right? You can grow from there. And, that's certainly, I guess, what we did here at Satflow is start with the problems around the mempool and some of the trading mechanics there. And, now, as you noted, we're a full exchange for all of these different assets with a incentive structure. And, that's a bit about our journey.
That's awesome. I think the other part that I think a lot of builders do have questions about is how do they go about financing their ideas and so on, right? And I think in some ways, the fundraise announcement is almost like a snapshot, right, of the credit I think that the community and the investors give you during that period of time. I would love to hear from you as well, how has your journey been? And, on the financing front, raising capital and so on, how do you think about this? What's your kind of mental model to share as builders in the community?
To be very transparent, this is the first venture I've done where I've raised venture financing. So take all of this with a bit of a grain of salt. But we announced our seed raise a few months ago. We have some great backers on boards, Asymmetric, Coinbase Ventures, Variant Fund, just to name a few. And we have some great angels as well. Directionally speaking, we have some tenets as we build, which is that, we're a Bitcoin first organization. All of the discussions we had with backers, it was seeking alignment around these tenets. On the product side, we actually found that some of our best angels and advisors have been big users of the product themselves, right? And that it's really apparent who's using your platform and why. And building for an investor and a user definitely is very gratifying, as some of our investors get very hands-on and use and love the product. And that was also kind of a big thing we looked for when finding great backers for Satflow.
How did you think about building community? What's your kind of style? If a team is looking to start building a community from scratch of maybe they have a group of 50 people, how would you advise them to scale that out?
Yeah, great question. The early days of Satflow, we just had, 10 or so people in the private beta. It was all about getting feedback, keeping a close feedback loop, creating a space where people can feel comfortable giving feedback early and often, right? And if you're solving for a small subset of users, they can refer their friends, they have a network, and your kind of user base can build very organically from that. I feel very strongly about always taking a call with the user, hearing their problems with the product, any other things we can be doing for them to solve other needs. I think just that tight feedback loop, creating a space for that, whether it's a Discord or Telegram, can be really effective for having sort of a good base of really strong power users that can help amplify your message and your product from there.
What would you be able to share about some of the metrics you're tracking? What are some of the things that you're kind of keeping an eye out for? What is top of mind for you, I guess, over the next week or so?
Yeah, great question. We haven't actually shared any of our metrics yet. We're still working on the public interface into all of our transactions. We actually do track every transaction in a way that everyone on chain can verify. So we include a small opcode with the tag Satflow on every transaction, and we will be sharing more metrics soon. But similar to many exchanges, we're really just laser focused on bringing in listings, bringing in liquidity, and bringing in traders. So these are some of the things we're thinking about. But at this stage, we don't we haven't published any metrics, but we'll certainly be doing so in the future.
Tell us a little bit more about what you expect the roadmap to be, I guess, in the next 1 to 3 months. I know it's one of those things where you always have less confidence the further out you go. What are you thinking about? What's top of mind for you?
We're not ones for establishing a big kind of roadmap. We do stay quite lean within our org as far as, like making too big commitments. We like to stay quite agile. However, some of the things we're thinking about are just like going back to this theme of like user problems. And what are the user problems today? We think we've solved a lot of them in kind of the mempool-first experience, but we're still seeing like kind of like a gap in standing liquidity for assets. Like that is just basically bid side liquidity. There aren't many bids for either fungibles or non-fungibles. And so for us to solve that, like we would like to lean into L kind of like 1.5 solutions, even some like kind of, smart contract like functionality with Opcat to solve some of the bid side liquidity issues. Bidding is definitely a top priority for us, like reducing all of the user friction there. But then like what can we do to settle trades faster, to make the trading experience quicker overall, and maybe remove some of these limitations that we have around the mempool. So for us, like we're really focused on Bitcoin native assets, ordinals, runes, and whatever comes next. But, want to solve some of the problems I mentioned around liquidity and, speed of transaction settlement.
Yeah, I really appreciate kind of you sharing the mental model, which is like trying to stay lean, right? At the end of the day, our industry is an industry where there's a lot of waves. There's a lot of like, trends that come and go. I think you gotta like be able to respond quickly and also be able to keep your ear on the ground, right? And I think that's really, really helpful. Yeah, I think the other thing that I do want to talk about is, you mentioned Opcat as well. And I think we've implemented Opcat on, Fractal. And I think we've seen some cool, really cool use cases around it, right? With like, Cat 20, with like some of these. And of course, on the Fractal team side, we're also implementing like Opcat-based voting mechanisms. But what have your team sort of been, interested in with regards to Opcat? I think you summarized it with a few points, but I'd love to hear how you view this opcode from your perspective.
It's tricky as we've only like really scratched the surface in some of the design space around Opcat. You touched on Fractal having implemented the opcode. We're certainly like tracking that and the adoption of Cat 20 as a fungible token standard over there. A lot of us see Opcat as a way to really extend Bitcoin's functionality, like down to like being able to trustlessly bridge Bitcoin over to other blockchains is an exciting design space. We're not super deep in the trenches yet on Opcat design for anything related to Satflow, as like there is just this whole process of getting Cat implemented on Bitcoin L1. So, we'll be tracking it closely. And I think once we have a strong sense of community signal and miner signaling around OPCat on Bitcoin, that's when we're going to be, getting a little more all in. Still just a ton of ambiguity as to if we'll even see Opcat as the solution to unlock more functionality on Bitcoin, right? There are some competing alternatives that we're starting to see, Arch Network being one of them, OpNet, for example, like BitVM as well, potentially. There are all of these competing designs to like extend and unlock Bitcoin on the L1 side and enable more functionality here, but it's just a little like unclear at this which the winners are going to be. But we're watching closely, and the next 12 months are going to be very interesting. There's going to be some good stuff, I'm sure.
What are some of the unexpected learnings that you have maybe gleaned from building on Bitcoin for the past, 1 or 2 years or 3 years? How would you characterize some of these things that you have learned so far?
Building within the UTXO model is definitely just radically different to, the design spaces we've seen on other blockchains, like with, Ethereum and Solana, for example. I think the biggest learning is like, wow, Bitcoin is hard to build on. There are all these competing stakeholders that haven't see a different direction for Bitcoin. We're partially aligned with in a lot of cases or not aligned in others. Hard to move within Bitcoin and see like upgrades and to unlock new functionality. But I think that's part of the fun, and there's clearly is demand to now build directly on L1, to build like true DeFi tooling to catch up from a feature parity standpoint. Yeah, we're just eager to see us catching up to like these other L1s.
If you had a magic wand, what would you wave it on? What would you wish would help builders kind of build better in Bitcoin in the broader ecosystem?
Expressivity on Bitcoin L1. Just seeing Opcat have a clear implementation date, and clear miner signaling for the interest there, just to like throw some bone to the developers so that we can get away from some of the like archaic PSPT designs that we have here on Bitcoin and be able to do more. So I think it would be good to see Opcat as an opcode added, just to continue the iteration and for Bitcoin developers to show some maybe of the legacy Bitcoin maximalists that like there is a demand, there is like real like Bitcoin holder demand for some of this stuff, and like there's a lot that is possible to do on Bitcoin that we can do just even with Opcat as an opcode.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's one of those things where, to a point, is really about having community consensus, having developer consensus, having miner consensus. I think what's awesome about Bitcoin in some sense is that the need for consensus is very strong, but consensus really makes the entire system stronger, right? And I think that's what's awesome about it. And I think overall, the quality of builders, I think over the past couple of like months or years coming back into Bitcoin has just been like really staggering. Everyone is like, bring a wealth of experience from everywhere, right? Whether it's building on the traditional finance or building on other ecosystems over. And of course, a lot of the existing builders who have built in Bitcoin for a long time also are still here, right? And I think that sort of like almost like the hot pot or mix of like various ideas is what is really exciting. Let's maybe like transition to something like a little bit more fun and random. I know you mentioned Node Monks earlier. Any other collections you're keeping an eye on? Any other runes collections or whatever you're learning more about? Not financial advice, of course, but just curious, what are you paying attention to?
I like the well-established high liquidity collections. Node Monks is certainly one of them. Bitcoin Puppets is another, just because it is such a like crazy, chaotic community with, there's this whole culture around the puppets that's very interesting to watch. Also, like Dog Go to the Moon on Bitcoin and some of the larger like Rune fungible tokens as well. The ones that have the most liquidity are just interesting to watch as a trader to sort of just keep track of, and they're super liquid, so can get in and out pretty quickly and experiment. But I think like more recently, just in the past few days, seeing the reemergence of the sort of microcap Rune coins has been interesting to see. Like, just today, I think there was another one that's minting out like around AI. I forget the name, but, very quickly it's taken the mempool by storm, and we're back to the degens paying, right now it costs on Bitcoin on one to just even send some Bitcoin. It's, back up to like $6-7. So yeah, it's just really interesting to track these like microcap meme coins and see them like really just come out of the woodwork and shoot over $10 million in value.
Yeah, the set for BB price is definitely kind of crazy, right? It fluctuates so much these days. Like you always have to have an eye on that just to understand what's going on, right? It makes sense. I think everything quite chaotic, but also at the same time quite interesting, right? And I think more interesting is always net good for the ecosystem, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we like to see the miners getting paid. That's a good thing. So like these Rune meme coins that have a like longer mint duration, like definitely are doing good things for the sort of security budget of Bitcoin. So yeah, it's always interesting to watch the state of the mempool. How expensive is it to use Bitcoin? That's a good indication of like how the community is feeling at the moment.
What I really enjoy about talking to builders like yourself is just that, you're deep in the trenches, but at the same time, you have one of the most, I think, awareness of where the market is heading, just because you listen to user feedback and you're executing with a very awesome team, right? Any key hires you're looking to do, any key partnerships, anything you would just make an ask openly at this point?
On the sort of growth standpoint, we're definitely hiring. If you're, an engineer with like kind of web experience, we'd love to chat. My DMs are open on Twitter, so shoot me a message, and would love to catch up.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Robert, for coming on today. Yeah, I wish you all the best for Satflow, and I look forward to at some point talking to you again about how things have been when you have published some of these metrics, some other iterations and so on down the road.
Thank you, Spencer.
Thank you. Bye.